Japan is one of the safest countries on Earth. Low crime, clean streets, bullet trains that run on time. And yet, tucked into its forests, mountains, tunnels, and coastlines, there are places that will make even the most level-headed traveler think twice. These are the 17 places in Japan you should never visit alone. Place 17, Aokigahara Forest, the Sea of Trees, Yamanashi Prefecture. Let's start with the one that everyone already knows, because pretending it doesn't belong on this list would be dishonest. Aokigahara, also called Jukai, meaning Sea of Trees, sits at the northwestern base of Mount Fuji, spreading across roughly 35 square kilometers of dense forest growing from hardened lava that poured down the mountain during an eruption in 864 CE. The geological character of Aokigahara is genuinely strange before you add anything else to it. The volcanic rock beneath the soil interferes with compasses and GPS devices. The trees grow so densely that wind rarely penetrates the interior, leaving the forest almost completely silent. Caves run beneath the surface. Hikers who step even slightly off marked trails can become genuinely lost within minutes in a way that is not metaphorical. In Japanese folklore, Aokigahara has been associated with demons and the spirits of the dead for centuries. The forest was historically linked to a practice called ubasute, the abandonment of elderly relatives during times of famine, and the yurai, or spirits, of those left to die there are said to remain. The forest's modern reputation as a suicide site is documented and ongoing. Police and volunteers conduct regular searches. Signs at the entrances urge visitors in crisis to seek help. If you go in a group. Stay on the marked trails. Tell someone where you are. The forest itself is ecologically remarkable, and the lava caves are legitimately fascinating. It is also the kind of place that has a documented history of people entering and not coming back. Place 16, the old Inunaki Tunnel, Fukuoka Prefecture. The old Inunaki Tunnel was completed in 1949 in the mountains of Fukuoka Prefecture, connecting Miyawaka City to Hisayama Town. When a new, larger tunnel was built nearby in 1975, the old one fell out of use. It became a haunt for motorcycle gangs, an illegal dumping site, and eventually a place so deteriorated and associated with violence that its entrances were sealed with concrete. The reason the concrete is there is not legend. On December 6, 1988, a 20-year-old factory worker named Koichi Umeyama was driving home from work when a group of 5 teenagers, aged 16 to 19, demanded his car. When he refused, they abducted him. Over the following hours, they beat him, transported him to the abandoned road leading to the old tunnel, and burned him alive. His body was found the next morning. The perpetrators were arrested within days and sentenced to life imprisonment. That event cemented the tunnel's reputation as something beyond ordinary unsettling. The area already had local ghost stories tied to workers who died during its construction. After 1988, those stories became harder to separate from the documented reality of what had happened there. In 1999, an anonymous letter sent to Nippon TV described the legend of Inunaki Village, a place beyond the tunnel where the Japanese Constitution supposedly did not apply, populated by villagers who killed trespassers. The village does not exist on any map and is generally understood to be urban legend. The tunnel is sealed, structurally compromised, and illegal to enter. The film Howling Village, released in 2019 and directed by Takashi Shimizu, was based directly on the Inunaki legend and contributed to a surge in trespassing. Fukuoka authorities have been dealing with uninvited visitors ever since. Place 15, Aokigahara's less famous cousin, Mount Osore, Aomori Prefecture. Mount Osore, literally Mount Fear or Mount Dread, sits in the Shimokita Peninsula of Aomori Prefecture in northern Honshu. It is one of Japan's 3 most sacred sites, alongside Mount Koya and Mount Hiei. It is also, by any practical description, one of the most genuinely eerie landscapes in the country. The mountain surrounds a caldera lake called Lake Usori, whose water is so acidic that very little can survive in it. The lake's shores are covered in gray volcanic rock and yellow sulfurous deposits. Vents in the ground release steam and gases. The ground bubbles in places. The smell of sulfur is constant and overwhelming. Traditional Buddhist belief holds that the Sanzu River, the Japanese equivalent of the river Styx that the dead must cross to reach the afterlife, runs through this landscape. The local Bodaiji temple sits at the edge of the caldera and has historically been associated with Itako, blind female mediums who were said to communicate with the spirits of the dead. Grieving families would travel to Osorezen festivals to contact deceased relatives through the Itako's rituals. The practice continues, though the number of practicing Itako has significantly declined. Visiting Mount Osore is legal and possible. The temple grounds are accessible during designated seasons. But the isolation of the area, the genuinely alien landscape of the caldera, and the deeply weighted spiritual history of the site make it one of those places where being alone with your thoughts in that environment is an experience that most people report as profoundly disorienting. Place 14, Nara Dreamland, Nara Prefecture, demolished 2016 to 2017. In 1955, Japanese businessman Kunizo Matsuo visited the newly opened Disneyland in Anaheim, California, and immediately began making plans. He negotiated with Walt Disney for a franchise. The deal fell through, reportedly over licensing fees. Undeterred, Matsuo built his own park anyway, borrowing the layout and aesthetic of Disneyland while creating his own characters and branding. Nara Dreamland opened on July 1st, 1961. It had its own Sleeping Beauty castle, its own Main Street, its own monorail, and its own wooden roller coaster called the Asuka, modeled on the Cyclone at Coney Island. At its peak, it welcomed 1.6 million visitors per year. Then, on April 15, 1983, Tokyo Disneyland opened. The real thing had arrived, and Nara Dreamland had no answer for it. By the early 2000s, most of the restaurants and shops had closed. Attractions had begun to rust. In 2001, Universal Studios Japan opened 40 kilometers away in Osaka and pulled 11 million visitors in its first year. Nara Dreamland permanently closed on August 31st, 2006. Its owner could not sell the land. The city gained ownership after unpaid property taxes but found no buyers at auction. The park sat untouched for a decade. Rides still on the tracks, furniture still in the restaurants, park maps still in the ticket booths, while vegetation slowly claimed the pathways and the structures corroded in the humidity. Urban explorers cataloged the decay across those 10 years. Some moved character statues into sinister positions on broken rides. The demolition finally began in October 2016 and was complete by December 2017. But for a decade, Nara Dreamland was one of the most photographed abandoned places in Asia, and visiting it was technically trespassing with fines of up to 100,000 yen. Place 13, the Kiyotaki Tunnel, Kyoto Prefecture. The Kiyotaki Tunnel runs between Arashiyama and Saga Kiyotaki in Kyoto Prefecture, a single-lane road tunnel about 444 meters long, connecting two parts of a mountain district that tourists visit for temples and bamboo groves. It is, by daytime and in traffic, entirely ordinary. It has a traffic light at one end because it's too narrow for two-way traffic. You wait for green, drive through, and emerge on the other side. The tunnel was built as part of the Aokigahara Railway, with construction completed in 1927 or 1928. Workers labored in harsh conditions with no pay. Deaths during construction were reported. The tunnel later became associated with suicides due to its secluded forest setting. The number 444 is significant in Japanese culture. The word for four, shai, is a homophone for death. A tunnel measuring 444 meters is, by local belief, as unlucky as a number can get. At night, the tunnel has a documented reputation for strange encounters. Drivers report seeing a woman in white at the exit or in their rearview mirror while inside. The specific warning that circulates, do not look in your rearview mirror while driving through. Whether the traffic light has been known to malfunction or the stories are embellished is impossible to untangle. The tunnel remains in active use during daylight hours. Night visits are discouraged, not just for supernatural reasons, but because the single-lane format, poor lighting, and steep surrounding terrain make it genuinely dangerous. Place 12, Takonuma Greenland, Fukushima Prefecture, demolished 2021. Takonuma Greenland was an amusement park in the Hobara district of Date City, Fukushima Prefecture. It opened in 1973, closed in 1999 due to declining attendance, and then sat abandoned in the Fukushima forest for over 2 decades while fog rolled in off the surrounding land, and the rides deteriorated into something that looked like a horror film. Production designer had been given an unlimited budget and no constraints. The park's reputation for strange activity grew during its abandonment. Visitors reported lights inside buildings that had no power source, sounds with no discernible origin, and an atmosphere that multiple photographers described as actively hostile to spending time there alone. Whether these reports were genuine or performative is impossible to verify. The photographs were real. The fog-shrouded carousel and rusted Ferris wheel became iconic images in Japan's urban exploration community. Unlike Nara Dreamland, which attracted international attention, Takonuma Greenland remained largely a domestic phenomenon, well known in Japanese Haikyo circles, but less covered in English-language travel writing. The park was demolished in 2021. Its reputation was built almost entirely on a decade of photographs taken by people who were technically trespassing. Place 11, the Bibai Round Schoolhouse, Hokkaido Prefecture. Between Sapporo and Asahikawa in central Hokkaido, the town of Bibai has a fairly unremarkable reputation for everything except one structure, the ruins of Shoto Elementary School, whose most notable feature was a circular secondary building that urban explorers have visited for decades, despite it being private property. The school was first established in 1906. It expanded significantly in the 1950s to accommodate workers and families arriving for the nearby Mitsubishi Bibai coal mine. When the mine closed in 1972, the population declined rapidly. The school followed in 1974. The official reason was reduced enrollment. The unofficial stories that circulated afterward involved the disappearance of a girl during a school break, a story that has never been confirmed and is generally understood as the kind of legend that attaches itself to any long-abandoned building near a mine. The circular building in particular has drawn visitors who report seeing lights moving in the structure, hearing sounds described as children's laughter or crying, and in some accounts, shadow figures visible in the windows. The building was structurally deteriorating, and entry was dangerous even before legal prohibition. As of recent years, the structure has largely collapsed. Place 10, Oiran Buchi, Yamanashi Prefecture. In Yamanashi Prefecture along Highway 411 near the Tama River, there is a section of steep cliffs above a gorge called Oiran Buchi. The name translates roughly to prostitute's ravine. The name is not an accident. During the Warring States period, roughly the 15th to late 16th centuries, there was said to be a gold mine operating in this area. When enemy forces threatened to discover the mine's location, the mine's operators made the decision that the roughly 55 Oiran, high-ranking courtesans who worked and lived in the area, could not be allowed to share what they knew. They were brought to the cliffs and pushed into the gorge. The bodies fell into the water below. A monument and a sign stand at the ravine today. Local tradition holds that the sign is cursed, that reading it in full invites misfortune, particularly for male visitors, whom the spirits of the murdered women are said to be actively hostile toward. The warning that visitors are likely to encounter near the monument suggests that the edge of the ravine is genuinely dangerous, the terrain is unstable, and the cliffs are steep. These practical hazards exist entirely independent of what happened there. The area is accessible and not illegal to visit. The guidebooks that recommend it typically do so in the context of autumn foliage, because the scenery is genuinely beautiful. The history is considerably less so. Place 9, Okiku's Well, Himeji Castle, Hyogo Prefecture. Himeji Castle is Japan's most famous surviving feudal castle, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a national treasure, and the setting for Akira Kurosawa's Ran, among other films. It is also, on its grounds, the location of a well called Okiku's Well, which is the most famous haunted well in Japan and one of the more credible-sounding stories on this list. The story of Okiku comes in several versions, the most widely known from the bunraku play Bancho Sarayashiki, written in 1741. A servant named Okiku was responsible for a set of 10 valuable porcelain plates belonging to her samurai lord. One plate was deliberately broken or hidden by a man who wanted to coerce her into becoming his mistress. When she refused, he accused her of losing the plate. Unable to clear her name, she was killed, thrown into the well on the castle grounds. Her ghost, the legend says, emerged from the well at night and could be heard counting the plates. 1, 2, 3, up to 9. Then a scream, because the 10th was always missing. Every night, the sound of counting from a well. The well still exists at Himeji Castle and can be viewed by visitors. It is a stone-lined structure that is genuinely old and genuinely sits on castle grounds that have been continuously significant for centuries. The play Bancho Sarayashiki has been performed in Japan for nearly 300 years, and the story of Okiku is widely recognized as one of the formative texts of Japanese ghost literature. Koji Suzuki has credited the Okiku legend as one of the inspirations for his Ring novels. Place 8. Yagiyama Bridge, Miyagi Prefecture. Yagiyama Bridge in Sendai, Miyagi Prefecture, was built in 1937 and spans a valley in an area otherwise known for its zoo and popular tourism sites. During daylight hours, it is a standard road bridge. After dark, its reputation is considerably more complex. The bridge has, since its construction, been a location associated with suicide. The Miyagi prefectural government has made repeated efforts to redesign the bridge's structure and add deterrence over the decades. The bridge is also remembered as being near the site of the All Nippon Airways Flight 58 crash of 1971, in which all 162 people aboard died. A memorial was erected in the area to honor those who died. The combination of the crash memorial and the bridge's history as a suicide site has given the broader area a weight that locals acknowledge and visitors quickly sense. Visitors to the bridge at night have reported unusual sounds and a general atmosphere described in multiple sources as deeply uncomfortable. Whether this is the documented human history of the location working on the imagination or something else entirely, the practical advice remains the same. It is not a place to visit after dark by yourself. Place 7. The SSS Curve, Okinawa Prefecture. Okinawa was the site of one of the most devastating battles of World War II. Between April and June of 1945, the Battle of Okinawa resulted in the deaths of approximately 12,000 American soldiers, around 110,000 Japanese military personnel, and an estimated 100,000 Okinawan civilians, roughly 1/4 of the civilian population of the island. The landscape of Okinawa contains human remains that have never been fully accounted for. The SSS Curve, named for its triple S road shape, is a stretch of highway in Okinawa with a documented history of unexplained accidents and what local accounts describe as paranormal encounters. Several Japanese television programs focused on the paranormal have filmed at the location. People report feeling nausea, dizziness, and the physical sensation of hands touching them without any discernible source while driving through or standing at the site. There is no independent scientific documentation of any of these effects. What is documented is the historical density of death on this island and the cultural weight that carries in Okinawan life, where memorials, prayer sites, and remembrance ceremonies for the war dead remain a living part of the community. Whether the SSS Curve specifically is a haunted road, or simply a place where the known history of the island makes people intensely susceptible to heightened perception, is a question no one has answered definitively. Place 6. Ikego Housing Area, Yokosuka, Kanagawa Prefecture. Located on a naval base in Yokosuka, the Ikego housing area has a history that began during World War II. The site was used as a facility where, according to historical accounts, Korean and Chinese prisoners of war were held under forced labor conditions. The number of deaths that occurred at the site varies by source, but is consistently described as significant. After the war, the site was taken over and developed as residential housing for U.S. military personnel and their families. The area is notable for its unexplained reputation among residents who have lived there. Between midnight and 1 a.m. on rainy nights, the figure of a samurai has reportedly been described as appearing to those walking alone on the property. The detail about rain and solitude appears consistently across accounts, which is specific enough to be either unusually reliable or unusually well-rehearsed as an urban legend. The housing area is on restricted military land. The history of the site is real. The stories are not universally confirmed. The combination is the whole point. Place 5. Nakagusuku Hotel Ruins, Okinawa Prefecture. The Nakagusuku Hotel was an ambitious resort project constructed near the historic Nakagusuku Castle in Okinawa in the early 1970s. Construction began, but was never completed. The site was abandoned mid-build and has stood as an unfinished concrete shell ever since. 5 stories of open framework overlooking the Pacific Ocean, adjacent to one of Okinawa's UNESCO World Heritage Sites. The reason construction stopped has been described variously in different sources: financial difficulties, legal disputes over the land, or, in the more commonly told local version, the disturbance of a sacred grave site during excavation, after which workers began experiencing accidents and illnesses until the project was abandoned entirely. The land in Okinawa, as noted above, has an unusual density of human history. Disturbing burial sites during construction is not a peripheral concern in this region. The site was a popular destination for urban explorers and thrill seekers for decades. Entry is illegal, and the structure is structurally dangerous. Open floors, exposed rebar, crumbling concrete, and no lighting or safety infrastructure of any kind. People have been injured there. Local authorities have repeatedly warned against entry. The castle ruin adjacent to it is spectacular and entirely legally accessible. The hotel ruin is neither. Place 4. Himuro Mansion, Tokyo. Urban legend. Himuro Mansion is the most contested entry on this list because, unlike every other place here, its existence as a specific physical location cannot be reliably verified. The legend holds that there is, somewhere in the outer reaches of Tokyo, a mansion where a family practiced a strangling ritual every 50 years to seal evil energy from the land. The ritual required sacrificing a family member, typically a young woman. One cycle, a man fell in love with the intended sacrifice and helped her escape. The ritual was broken. The family had killed everyone remaining in the household and then himself. The mansion has been haunted ever since, and those who visit it alone risk being drawn into the unfinished ritual. The legend of Himuro Mansion is most widely known in the West because the Fatal Frame video game series, a Japanese survival horror franchise that began in 2001, drew directly on this legend. Fatal Frame became internationally successful and brought the Himuro story to a global audience. Whether the mansion exists as a specific location and whether any of the events in the legend occurred is genuinely unclear. Multiple people have claimed to know where it is. Multiple investigations have found nothing. What is real is the legend, its cultural presence in Japan, and the Fatal Frame games, which are independently excellent. Visiting a place that may not exist is an interesting philosophical position. Wandering alone through the outer reaches of Tokyo, looking for a mansion from an urban legend, is a different problem entirely. Place 3. Aoyama Cemetery at night, Tokyo. Aoyama Cemetery is one of Tokyo's oldest and largest public cemeteries, covering approximately 26 hectares in the Minami Aoyama district of Minato Ward. It was established in 1872 and contains over 126,000 graves, including those of numerous prominent historical figures. During cherry blossom season, it is one of the most beautiful viewing spots in the city, lined with trees and regularly visited by families and couples. At night, it is something different. The streets immediately surrounding Aoyama Cemetery have a documented reputation among Tokyo taxi drivers for unusual occurrences. The specific claim, which has circulated long enough to be considered an established piece of Tokyo urban folklore, is that drivers who pick up passengers near the cemetery late at night have had passengers who ask to be taken to a specific destination, pay the fare, and then are discovered to no longer be in the vehicle when it arrives. In some accounts, the backseat is wet. How many documented cases there are, and whether any have been investigated by any party with any methodological rigor, is a separate question. What is true is that cemeteries at night in any city have a quality that is independent of belief in ghosts. Aoyama Cemetery, specifically, has 126,000 graves and over a century of accumulated weight. It is a place where it is genuinely unwise to be wandering alone after midnight, for reasons that have nothing to do with the supernatural. Place 2. The Sunshine 60 Building, Tokyo. The Sunshine 60 Building in the Ikebukuro district of Tokyo is a 60-story skyscraper completed in 1978 and, for a time, the tallest building in Asia. It houses offices, a shopping complex, an aquarium, and an observation deck. It receives millions of visitors per year. It is also built on the site of Sugamo Prison. Sugamo Prison operated from 1895 to 1971. During that period, 7 Class A war criminals were hanged there on December 23, 1948, including former Prime Minister Hideki Tojo. Soviet spy Richard Sorge was executed there in 1944. The prison was the site of executions of numerous individuals during and after World War II. When the prison was demolished in the 1970s and construction of Sunshine City began, workers reported a range of unusual incidents. Reports of supernatural sightings in and around the building have been documented since its completion. The site is entirely accessible and legal to visit. The observation deck has views of the entire Tokyo skyline. The aquarium is excellent. None of that erases what the ground beneath it is, or the documented history of what happened there. One of the standard pieces of advice that circulates about the building is simply this: be aware of where you are standing. Place 1, Hashima Island, Gunkanjima, Nagasaki Prefecture. Hashima Island, called Gunkanjima, meaning Battleship Island, for the silhouette it makes on the horizon, is approximately 15 kilometers off the coast of Nagasaki. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site with authorized boat tours. It is also a place of documented human suffering on a scale that makes it difficult to describe as merely eerie. The island was developed by Mitsubishi beginning in 1887 as an undersea coal mining facility. At its peak in 1959, the 6.3-hectare island housed 5,259 people, giving it the highest recorded population density of any place on Earth at that time. It had apartment blocks, a school, a hospital, shops, and a cinema, all reinforced behind concrete seawalls without which the island would have washed away. During World War II, Hashima was a site of forced labor. Korean civilians and Chinese prisoners of war were brought to the island to work in the mines under brutal conditions. Deaths during this period are documented in the hundreds. Japan's acknowledgement of this history was a condition of UNESCO World Heritage designation, though what has actually been memorialized versus what was promised has remained a source of international dispute. When coal lost its economic position to petroleum, Mitsubishi closed the mine on January 15, 1974. The last resident left on April 20, 1974. Everything remained. Furniture, personal belongings, clothes in closets, because removing it was not worth the cost. For 35 years, the island was off limits, and the buildings deteriorated under sea salt and typhoon winds. It reopened to limited tourism in 2009. Tours take you to 3 designated viewpoints. The residential buildings are not accessible because they are structurally compromised. From those viewpoints, you can see collapsed floors, rusted staircases going nowhere, and apartment windows with the curtains still hanging. You cannot be alone on Hashima. Tours are mandatory and group only. That is perhaps the most appropriate policy for a place with this much history in this small A space. Japan is, by most measures, one of the safest countries on Earth. The places on this list are not unsafe in any ordinary sense. The crime rate is low, the infrastructure is reliable, and help is generally not far away. What makes these places uncomfortable is different. History, isolation, scale, or the kind of accumulated human experience that even the most committed skeptic tends to feel as something. If you've been to any of these places, or if there's one we missed that belongs here, say so in the comments. And if this is the kind of thing you want more of, subscribe. We will keep finding them.